We're on to our final speaker for today, Olivier Kaeser, if I'm pronouncing right now, is an art historian and curator currently based in Paris. He has worked at the Contemporary Art Center in Geneva and then founded an independent art space called Attitudes in 1994 with Jean-Paul Fellet, with whom he also currently works. It's a collaborative relation that perhaps we can also discuss what it means to together co-direct the Swiss Culture Center in Paris, which is part of Pro Helvetia. And some of the exhibitions he has curated include artists Sebastian Diaz-Morales, Mark Lewis, Multiplicity, Antoni Muntades, Shahriar Nassat, Dan Perjovci, Cool and Fabio Balducci, among others. And he's going to be talking about a number of different exhibition formats today with us, including working on artist books, perhaps, to perhaps shed light on that as well. In 2015, the project he co-curated, Performance Process, which was an exhibition festival and which is a continuing project, and we will hear about this too. Welcome, Olivier.
Thank you. Thank you, Natasha. Thank you, Experimenter, Priyanka and Pratek, Mohor, and all the team for this beautiful organization. And also let me address a very warm thank you to Chandrika Grover. We are colleagues. She's heading Pro Helvetia India in New Delhi. So thank you for this wonderful discussion that we had for a couple of years now, mainly in Zurich, and for this invitation here. And congratulations for what you did in India, not only for Swiss Artists, but much wider, including for the hub. Okay, so let's have, you can go for the next. Let's have a very quick look on my background. So I'm Swiss, I'm from Geneva. So I just wanted to see, I won't talk about any artists from Asia. And regarding lots of other presentations yesterday and today, I'm considering myself as a curator active in a very protected context. We can maybe discuss that tomorrow. Okay, so as you said, after my studies at the University of Geneva, I co-founded Attitude, this independent art space in Geneva, and we have been active from 1994 up to 2008, 2012, depending how we count. We had different venues in Geneva and a lot of traveling activity in various cities in Switzerland, in Europe, and also with a kind of what we can call expedition group shows in different cities, Buenos Aires, Santiago de Chile, and Beirut. In total, we made with this organization, so together with Jean-Paul Fellet, as Natasha said, more than 100 exhibitions and about 100 events plus publication plus a journal and a website. Now, from late 2008, next please, we are a co-director of the Swiss Culture Center in Paris. It's the representation in France of Pro Helvetia, Swiss Foundation for Culture. The aim is to, so that was some of the artists we work with under the name of Attitude. It's just to tell you that I'm not working only with Swiss artists. That was before, and I will get back to international artists also after my mandate to the Swiss Cultural Center. Next, please. Yeah, so the aim of Swiss Cultural Center is to present and promote Swiss contemporary culture on a multidisciplinary base. We are working on visual art, theater, dance, music, performance, architecture, graphic design, literature, film. And the tool is one main exhibition space, one small exhibition space, an auditorium of about 100 seats, plus a bookshop. We are a team of about 11 persons. Next. Yeah, so as we are in Calcutta, maybe it's good to have a view on what is the tool, Swiss Cultural Center. We are in Le Marais, so very central Paris. Next, this is the entrance, this is the passage, and the physical entrance of the exhibition spaces and auditorium. Next. And this is the courtyard, so the building on the right side. So it's also an installation by artist Pierre Vadi. So on the right side, it's the office building. It's a building of the early 17th century. So it's a bit, I mean, the physical and cultural and architectural context is a bit different. This is the main exhibition space, so empty. Next, just to indicate it's a kind of half white cube, let's say. So, and this is the other smaller space in the old building with a part of a piece by Nicolas Party. This is the auditorium, so about a stage of 7 by 7 meters, about 100 seats. Next, at a view, and also still to have an idea of the tool. Next, this is the bookshop that we open when we arrive. So it opened in a bit later than when we arrived. It opened in spring 2010. Before it was a library, and we made transformation with architect Jacob McFarlane. And this is the interior. We also make next, you know, book lounge. This is a signature by famous photographer René Bury. Small presentation in the bookshop. Next. And yeah, so that was the tool. Now the team. So that's relatively ancient photos. It was taken in 2010, but it's also to say an homage to Jean-Christophe Hamann, the figure in the center. Jean-Christophe Hamann is a major curator who passed away 2 years ago, and he was a very inspiring figure for Jean-Paul and me. So we invited him to curate a show at the CCS in 2010. So he's surrounded by a part of the team, plus some of the artists involved in his show, plus some guests. So in the courtyard of CCS. So that's the team. Next. And okay, so the average activity of CCS is that 9 exhibitions, 2 publications, about 70 evenings with these different disciplines. And we also produce a journal, and we worked in partnership with different other art institutions, mainly in Paris, but sometimes also in Switzerland. Next. So yeah, very simple words, you know, what's curating? So maybe 3 points. Learning from artists, because, you know, I was thinking, well, what's curating for me? Learning from artists is important because it's probably the way I most learned. It's by talking with artists on a long-term base. Considering a context is important because, you know, the context, we learn from the context, but we also have to propose for a context. So the context can be, of course, cultural, political, physical, architectural. All these counts on what you do. And then imagining something stimulating for all the involved people. That means artists, of course, because they have to be stimulated for the curators, but also for the public. So I include the involved people. Also, the public is also an involved people. Next. Another point, so we have kind of, we let a lot of freedom to the artists to imagine the show together with them. So that just to show you different way to use the space, so with different walls. So that the way to place the wall, or to have walls or not walls, is also part of the discussion and the freedom that we let to the artists. That was before transformation, and after transformation. Next, it's we have a bigger space, so we mainly use as it complete open space on the left side, but also with some wall on the right side. Next. Just 4 very quick examples of collaboration with artists which achieved to be a kind of premiere for the artists. For example, with Olivier Kaeser, for his 17th anniversary, we made with him the first ever show that he made only with collaboration with all the other artists. So I don't go to details, but just this view. Another view, please, next. So Mediengruppe Bitnik, that was also a long dialogue. So they had the idea, but we took about 8-9 months to define together how will be the result as an exhibition from the idea that they had. Next. Thomas Huber, at the age of 62, it was the first time that he made an exhibition entirely site-specific, so and dedicated to one new topic, which is sexuality, in addition to architecture, which is the topic is the most well-known. And finally, the most recent one, Sylvia Beschli and Eric Attan, they know each other for 40 years but it was the first time they really imagined a collaborative show with their individual works together. Okay, so now we go deeply in other 3 examples. The first one is Les Frères Chapuzat, so Chapuzat brothers. They are based more or less in Geneva. It was a site-specific installation made in 2011. So they are builders, mainly builders. The idea for this exhibition was, the starting point was this. It was, you know, they noticed this construction is, how do you call that in English? Sorry. It's, no, breakwaters, yeah. So they are mainly working on a field in between visual art and architecture. So inspiration comes from artists like, or architects like Jona Friedman, Antti Lovag, Anne Farm, Gordon Matakar, of course, Merzbau by Kurt Schwitters. The borough of Kafka is important for their practice, and they also have a kind of relationship with speleology. For them, the artworks are at the same time the context and the content. We know them from 2005. So for this project, they took this as a starting point, so this breakwater type acropod, and they saw that in Nice, south of France, and there were homeless people living here. So their interest was to kind of recreate this structure and find a way with this social observation and interest for the architecture to create a site-specific installation. So that's the process to rebuild this structure. Next. That was an option to make that in foams, in polyurethane foams. But also after months and months of discussion with a plan A, B, C, D, finally they decided, and we decided with them, to make a kind of construction site in the art center in itself. So we will see some of you of this building. So that means 7 weeks building the installation with 6 workers. And so Chapuzat brothers are 2 brothers, but it's mainly one, Grégory Chapuzat, together with Cyril, but now Grégory is working practically alone. But the builders are called brothers because they are the artists who choose the brothers and not the institution. So it's a kind of collaborative project, a kind of temporary community that they build from project to project. So that's the process of the installation building. We can go And that's the result. So it's you don't really recognize the exhibition space. We can go on. And it's also an exhibition to discover standing, but also on the knees, also ramping. So it's really, and for some of this structure, you can go inside. So it's more a physical experience than just a visit. So yeah, that's really impressive to work with them, and it's a huge work, of course, as you can see. Next. Yeah, so you can go ramping there. And it's all wood, and they build it on site. And we published a book. At the time, it was the documentation on 38 projects that they made, because all these projects have been ephemeral. So everything is built, and then everything is destroyed or recycled. And that's a funny thing. That's if you go to their website, you see how they present themselves. So that's the number of projects they are working on or that they realize. So that's Europe. And the next one is the world. Yeah. So they are active simultaneously. At the moment, Gregory is working on in a building with a very specific project in Chicago, after having realized a project in a villa in Los Angeles. And that's Gregory. So it's also, as he's very concerned with the way to live and the notion of house, that's his house. He's really a nomad. Second example, Miriam Khan, a solo show in 2014. So that was a mix of works realized from the late 70s to 2014 with black and white charcoal drawings, photos, sketchbook, room installation, and new color paintings, plus the addition of an artist book. Can go. And that's important because that's the plan, the wish plan of Miriam. So she wanted to create a kind of parcours, so physical parcours, but also a historical parcours in her own work. And so we add quite a lot of new walls for her solo presentation. And that was really her wish. Miriam hanging herself some of the works. Next. She's really a strong character, so, and making herself a lot of work as well. So you know, maybe some, if we go just before, there is, you know, kind of similarity of the body that she's painting and her body, for some example. And then we will go next. Yeah, that was the first room with the early works, black and white charcoal works on the left side, so late 70s. These photo works on this display. Next. Some sketchbook on the floor on the right side, and some choice of drawing on the wall, closer view. The sketchbook are really the matrix of the world. She's testing almost everything in these sketchbooks. Another view, next. This was a room installation, so 11 painting with a 11 painting with a lying figure, so between somebody sleeping, dreaming, or dead. And this was the the room that we were already saying, and the final room in the central of the next, next. That was the central room, so the end of this parcours, with, you know, figure like exile family or migrants mixed with more abstract things, or very alive tree, the tree of life. And that's some extracts of the book. Yeah, okay, so let's go. So extracts of one of the sketchbooks she was made, and it's the book that we choose to reproduce as a facsimile. So that's the original one. And finally, that was the result of this collaboration with her, with a very delicate work with the printer and all the people involved in that. And this is her very brand new studio and house. She quitted completely Basel now, because she's identified as a Basel Bay artist, and she is living in a valley in Grison, in Graubünden, so very near the village where all the Giacometti family were born. So it's really in the mountains. So performance process, this approach of Swiss performance art from the 60s, that was a kind of crazy project that we made 2 years ago, and that we will replay in a different way in Basel in 3 institutions next fall. So that's the 46 artists or groups or companies involved. So mixing visual artists and artists coming from the field of performing arts, and with a scenography by architects Bureau A. So the historical field started with Jean Tinguely, especially with this work. So autodestructive machines that he realized in the garden of MoMA in New York, 1960. So he was one of the 2 first, with Gustav Metzger, the Austrian artist, to use these autodestructive machines. That's another very spectacular autodestructive machine realized in Nevada, so near Las Vegas, in 1962. And that's another very provocative, masculine sex exploding in front of the Milano Dome in 1970. It would be completely impossible to do such a piece now. And that's also just to, because it's called Swiss performance art, just to tell you with these 3 maps the origin of the different works that we are included in this show. So some were made first in various cities in Switzerland, some next in various cities in Europe, and some others in various cities in the world. So, of course, performance, there are some, according to the definition of happening by Alan Capro, some has been made just once, and mainly the old ones, 60s, 70s, and now more and more artists who are practicing performance are remaking. So it's still performance, but they are replaying or representing the performance several times. Next. So that, as a response to Tinguely of the early 60s, of course, we started the show with an explosion, a cannonball from Ramon Signer. So next, that was during the opening with the Minister of Culture in the audience. So that was quite energetic and provocative starting point. And so we can look at different next. So that's a view, a general view with this scenography, all gray by Bureau A, the architects. And so there was a lot of, documentation, so photos, video. All the video was in these boxes like this. And in the central space, we let the central space empty to present a solo presentation during 5 days. And each week, we changed solo presentation. So it was solo show inside a group show. So we will see several solo shows. That's Jean-Paul showing to the Ministry of Culture a work by Larry Bott. So it's 50 chairs with quotes of thinker, artist, philosopher, art critic, dedicated to what is the movement. So we can read the chair and also to be seated on it. Next. So, yeah, historical part, so Jean Tinguely, Daniel Speury, Urs Luthi, next. Urs Luthi on the left, Tony Morgan on the right. Dieter Meyer, Luciano Castelli. Castelli, that was the early 80s in Berlin, for example. He was playing first part of the concert of Nina Hagen, so it was a bit the punkers, you know. Roman Signer, next. Also, yeah, scores, like documentary scores by young artist Martina Sophie Wilberger, which next can be performed by her or other artists next. So reading in different language, it's 4, 5 languages next. Roman Signer, a fantastic film that he made on the lake of Bolzano with an helicopter and a piano player. These are photos made with a digital technique in 2015 that we co-produce using a document of the 70s by Urs Luthi. These are scores by Christian Marclay with an installation, video installation by Christian Marclay and score by Christian. Next. Details on this score. So this score has to be played, as we can see, next. So played by a pianist, Jacques Demière, played next by a harp musician, Hélène Bréchon, and also another performance with all material found in a storage of CCS by Christian Marclay, Jacques Demière, and Hélène Bréchon. This is a huge slide projection of a performance made by Manon in Zurich in 1976. So a kind of facing of male figure facing the audience. That was a real shop with people outside. This was a crazy project that we can produce during Nuit Blanche in Paris of Massimo Furlan, with a carousel and several actors telling stories, very spectacular. Next. Play by Alexandra Batsiensis, the choreographer, that was at Centre Pompidou, a partnership in the occasion of this performance process. Next. Another view of this same performance by Alexandra. Next. And this was, this is another example of performance made by Marius Schafter. That's a version of a performance in the Musée de la Chasse et de la Nature, so next, with a very special adaptation of their project in this very, ancient and historical place, and the same piece in another version next in the auditorium of Centre Culturel Suisse. So we passed from ping pong to tennis, and next, a concert of Cactus Crackling playing by Christophe Rutiman in the Jardin des Plantes, and another version of this concert at the CCS in the lobby. And this is another kind of lecture, process lecture, like a kind of Wikipedia endless storytelling by François Gromet and Pierre Misfud. So we organize a Paris tour in different venues. That's Maison Rouge, next. That's Musée Picasso, next. That's Centre Pompidou, next. That's Le Bal, and that's CCS. That was the total of this performance during 8 hours. Next. A film of Anne Rocha. It was a performance performed live. She crossed a lake in the Swiss mountains, and it was broadcast live in the auditorium. It takes 4 hours for her to swim. Another long process performance by Guillaume Pillet with a display and instrumentarium that he let use by an actor with a protocol. So the actor is reading the protocol. It lasts 5 days, and the actor is executing the protocol. So next, we see the evolution of this huge painting during 5 days. Another long-term next performance was choreographer Foufoy de l'Immobilité. So during 125 hours, he was living here and dancing, speaking to the audience with this kind of fountain of glue, which was activated by a heating system. And out of the opening hours, there was a broadcast that can be seen from the window from the street. Heinrich Löber, next. Katja Schenker, dealing with the building and the forces, next. Gisela Hochuli, giving homage to Meret Oppenheim, next. The collective EW, a mix of a visual artist and a choreographer, next. Oscar Gomez Mata, so it's a theater company based on Gerasim Luca poetry. Gregory Stauffer, Jan Duvendak, it's a kind of vocabulary of gesture also. That's why I'm showing a lot of images. So Jan Duvendak playing with a TV reference and video game references. That's mainly pieces of the 90s. Ioannis Mandafounis Aoifema Katamne, so outside. And finally, Gianni Motti, who play with this cliché of the Swiss Guard, in this case not for the Pope in Rome, but for the Centre Culturel Suisse in Paris. It was just after the bombing, so in December 2015. So it was a kind of special response to the situation, because the Swiss Guards are in a way an army for the Pope, but here no weapons. And just some inputs. One of the aims of this exhibition is to put these artworks of Swiss performer or visual artist in perspective, compare to some other international artists, maybe more known international artists. For example, People's Presence, Tony Morgan, a British-Swiss artist. In 1970, he made this performance looking eye to eye to all the people queuing to have 1 minute of looking eye to him. So that was in 70. Next. That was in 73, Urs Luthi, also being in a cafe and looking the glance of everybody and trying to keep the eye-to-eye contact. Another in 79 by more or less the same situation between Manon and the audience. And of course, all this reminds you next, the famous Nightsea Crossing of Abramovich on Ulay, made from 81 and then remade at the MoMA in New York in 2010. So it's also a way to reconsider history of performance with this position. Another comparison between Manon, 77, a reproduction of the self, compared to Vanessa Beecroft, for example, in 2007. And another example, to put Luciano Castelli, The Beach and Her Dog, 81, in relation to Valley Expo and to Oleg Kulik, so 68, 95, so almost the same performance. So there are, reconsideration to do and some perspective to think about and maybe to re-articulate in history with this exhibition next. And also to think about the performative aspect regarding this historical exhibition Transformer made by Jean-Christophe Hamann in 1974 in Lucerne with lots of artists. So that was one of the first major exhibitions regarding the sexual identity and sexual ambiguity. For example, Tony Morgan was part of that, but not with performance. Next. And that was already a starting discussion with the symposium that we made. Next. We also create a dedicated website, which is like an online publication of the project. Next. So designed by Ludovic Ballon. So it's a kind of platform, documentary platform on all the artists involved. Next. With a page dedicated with a lot of resources, documentation of what happened, but also text, image, video, interview. Next. And all this will be rearticulated and developed in a new shape and with 3 different partner institutions in Basel from September 2017. So first, the Musée Tinguely Museum in Basel, then Kaserne Basel, the theater dedicated to experimental performing art, and also Kunsthalle Basel, where Elena Filipovic will do her own exhibition, being part of this big operation on performance in Basel this next fall and winter. A last word, we made also this big book about the story of Centre Culturel Suisse in 2015. So it was a huge work with thousands of data inside. So 30 years of multidisciplinary activity. And what's left? Yeah, that's the journal that we are publishing, 3 issues per year. And that's the next show of Pauline Julier for the September-December period. And just a word on this image. It's the oldest forest in the world, found in China after archaeological research after 2010. But it's another story. Please come to see us in Paris if you pass by. And you can always, the last picture, follow our activity on the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier, and thank you, audience, for staying with us. We are going to have the last discussion for today, and then again sort of continue fresh tomorrow. But I have some questions for Olivier, and then we also open up because we are a bit short on time. So please do intervene. I'm particularly interested in Miriam Khan's work. Also having seen her install in Athens and at Documenta, what was quite fascinating was, of course, how hands-on she is in terms of the process of installing, the process of narrating her work through the drawings. There's in fact also often, as you've included the sketchbooks, there's a lot of ancillary material that helps to reposition her longer trajectory. And I'm wondering how, if you could share a little bit more, since you mentioned that there's also the drawing of her, the floor plan, etc. How involved have you been in the longer trajectory of her work?
We know her, but with a distance for maybe the early 90s, and we were discussing with Jean-Paul about the opportunity to make a show, and finally we decided to go to Basel for, at the time she was still in Basel, to go for a studio visit. It was in 2012, and that was one of the most intense studio visits I have had, because we spent maybe 3-4 hours there, and we had the impression to be able to make a museum show of 10-12 rooms without being with too many material. So it was so intense, it was so deep, and she's so involved in her work. That's really impressive. So we immediately proposed her to make this exhibition, and of course the space that you saw is very small. It's only at that time it was 210 square meters, so it's really small. But finally we succeeded to make this kind of parcours, and she was really deeply involved, and she has a reputation to be somebody difficult, and with us everything went absolutely well, and with a lot of respect, a lot of sharing, very good quality of dialogue, but she wanted to make. I mean, she decided, but she's still open. I mean, but as you mentioned, Documenta, we can also tell this story because when she was a very young artist, she was invited by Rudi Fuchs for the Documenta 82, and she went to Kassel. She had a room for her, and she made a room installation, and it was 1 month in advance before the opening. So she went back to Basel and went back to Kassel 2 days before the opening, and the curators had another artist in the middle of the room without telling her. So she tried to talk with the curators, and finally she decided to dismantle all the work, pack the work, and go away. And everybody told her, well, you're crazy, your career is dead, you can't do that with Documenta. And just one artist was very supportive to her with this act. It was Meret Oppenheim. And so 82, now 2017, she's at Documenta again. So this time not only in the catalog, but physically with a group of black and white charcoal drawing in Athens, and with a color painting in Kassel. And yeah, she's a very deep artist. And now, the oscillation of the fame and also for the market, now the market goes very well for her work through galleries in France and Germany in particular, and even in New York.
And also in terms of just to come to performance process, in terms of the format, especially when you deal with the history of performance, what sometimes gets left out is the kind of context in which those performances were made, and often those are, coming from even like a longer tradition of Dada or Surrealism. There's a very rich context around which performance is made, right? And so it's interesting that you created what is an exhibition festival, so that it isn't limited to an archival presentation of historical performances, but this reenactment, a sort of enchanting way, this liveness and expanded time. So perhaps to maybe discuss, like, how would you continue that? Because there is...
Well, for us it was absolutely necessary to have live aspect in such a project on performance, because the idea to have only documentation would be, for me, would be wrong. I mean, it would give the idea of a dead material only, and so that's why I think this exhibition or this project has to be a bit messy, a bit with some unexpected things happening, of course, but mixing, you know, archive, document, works, and new material, and also new performance that we co-produced, or that was already existing and that we presented again. So performance of the 90s have been reenacted by the artists themselves, and new performance has been commissioned. And in Basel, the situation will be different because the space dedicated to exhibition is much larger. But as we made this system of successively, you know, successive focus in Paris, what we shown as a very short solo exhibition will be spread out differently in the Musée Tinguely in Basel, but also with the program of performance inside the show, but mainly in other spaces in the museum, also in the city, and also with Kaserne Basel. So in their theater, in the various locations, I mean rooms of the theater, but also two will be developed in the city. The one of Fou de Mobilité, a dance walk across the three borders. You know, Basel is has border with Germany and France, so he will put that in perspective, and also Massimo Furlan.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
Hi, thanks, Olivier. I'm curious about, so if you look at your own parcours, as you say, and something like Attitude, which is a self-created, more or less, very nimble structure from the way that you describe it. And someone earlier was talking about the parameters within which curators work, whether institutional or social or otherwise. And I'm curious, that leap from something like Attitudes, which seems again quite agile, into the CCS, which you yourself describe as, I think you said, a very protected context. Whatever. And I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate on that for us a little bit, and describe personally how you live the transition from you know, or what is the curatorial kind of personal experience like, shifting from one to the other and living within those two seemingly different spaces that maybe I'm not actually right.
Yeah, of course. You know, Attitude is an independent art space, so which is also something that I have to mention. Switzerland is very known and relevant with all the independent initiatives. You know, artist-run space, associative space, or associative initiatives from the 70s onwards. That's very relevant. And that's generally the step before to exhibit in a Kunsthalle, for example, for artists. The majority of the artists start to be exhibited in an artist-run space or associative structure. So with Attitude, we had a complete liberty, freedom of action, but the limit was that we were no budget, and we had to invent the budget and invent the space. So we were much more international in a way, but much more fragile. With the CCS, we have a budget, we have a team, and we belong to a wider organization, which is Pro Helvetia. So we are more free in a way because we have the means to work, but we are more, we have to answer to this mandate to promote Swiss artists in France. So, of course, it's a different situation. And I also wanted to say, for me, curating is depending of the context. So, the fields of interest are similar, of course, along the life, but developed by different inputs, and this context is a fantastic input for me. I mean, the hub context. But of course, the kind of project we made in the frame of Attitude were not the same as the project that we are making at the CCS. Also because the situation, not only the typology of structure is different, but also because Geneva is a very different context compared to Paris. You know, in Geneva we can make collaboration with almost everybody because it's a very small scene, so everybody know each other quite quickly. Paris is a very competitive situation with big institution, with lots of art center, especially around Paris, and lots of galleries. So you have to propose something even more original and yeah, that you can't see elsewhere. But the context and after the end, because we are ending the contract next year, so afterwards we don't know what we will do, but either in the frame of another institution or as freelance, we will do other kind of project, having always the same fields of interest, but necessarily it will be other kind of project.
Olivier,
Sure.
I just want to ask you, have you ever come across, or have you even, directly or indirectly, about the suppression of police force or some kind of instrument of state power in terms of a performance which is bordering on subversion or something like that? Because I think I read somewhere in one of the student journal of the New School of Social Research, one of the students came and performed there, maybe somewhere in the precincts of Art Basel or somewhere, in Switzerland, of course. And also he was, in course of his performance, he was trying to take out a rubber penis, which was mistaken as a pistol, and he was shot at, not fatally though. So I was kind of wondering, sometimes these kind of things do take place. And it's a very severe case, that suddenly an instrument of power is shooting at an artist. And I don't know whether you've even heard about it in 2015.
Where was this?
In Basel.
In Basel.
But where in Basel?
I don't know exactly. I mean, it was something that I read, and I didn't care where it was, but it was so much kind of taken up my mind, and it came out also in this, New School of Social Research has a very wonderful kind of journal which comes out, and also a newsletter. So I read that, in that one of these issues, and I was wondering whether or not, even taking it as an isolated case, is there some kind of an inkling of any kind of dominance of this kind of state power over certain kind of unmanageable or provocative performance kind of incidents or performance arts?
I haven't heard about this case, but personally, either in Attitude or at the CCS, we never had any restriction from any person or official organization.
I mean, even as a person, you might have read in the news.
Yeah, but I didn't. I'm sorry.
Do we have more time, or maybe just there's a question here that maybe we can take up as in conclusion is, in your team, are there any other curators besides you and your co-director?
You do 9 exhibitions a year. That's quite a number.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have other curators on your team?
No.
You do all 9?
Well, it depends. No. Of course we do all 9, but it's the size. Just to have an idea of the size. The main room is 250 square meters, and a small room is 40 square meters. So it's a kind of project room. But yeah, we do 9 exhibitions per year at the moment.
That's still quite a large number.
Yeah, and in addition, we are also taking.
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
How much time in advance do you plan? I mean, 9 in a year?
Yeah.
2 years, 3 years, 4 years?
In advance? No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no.
No?
No, no. No, for example, performance process was certainly the one we planned the most in advance. It was more or less 2 years. But the other ones, it depends. It's between, for the big ones, it's, let's say, between 8 months and 1 year and a half.
In advance?
In advance. And,
but you've been working constantly.
Yes.
All year round on 9 exhibitions in a year. That's shocking.
It's mainly solo shows. So it's all. But this question of the solo versus thematic show or more differently articulated show is also related to the typology of space. Because, and that's also because I noticed this question of the context. Because we consider that we can make relevant exhibition solo, but it's not at all an ideal venue to develop a thematic show. That's also why with this performance process we invent this kind of new space using the 250 square meter as plus the small space as the field for the exhibition, but letting this central space empty for this 5 days solo show, which changed every week. So it was 13 different solo shows in 13 weeks. That was a kind of crazy, program.
Yeah.
And in total, we had about 150 hours of performance, because some of them were 5 days long. Yeah. But it's also, that related to your question with the archive or the document and the live. It's also a way to experiment this. So you have to test things, because with performance you never know really what will happen. Well, in some cases because it's the artist already made it and it's a kind of replay. But with lots of others, the new ones, the new commission ones, you don't know exactly what will happen. So you have to test, and to test requires time.
Oh, I'm sure. And you have to approve the content, or you don't?
To approve the content?
Yes.
Of course, we discuss the content in advance, but we discuss the guidelines. I mean, we can't control everything in advance.
Yeah.
So we know more or less the artists want to go, and we know the title, we know the setting, we know a lot, but not all. But hopefully.
Yes, I'm sure.
No, it's. I mean, we consider really this space as a laboratory. It's really,
That's a very nice way of putting it. Actually.
Yeah. So artists come and they are extremely free to test things. But it's also what makes the job exciting, because you are so much involved with them. The dialogue is constant, and even during the show, because sometimes things are in evolution, including during the show. But that's make the activity exciting.
But with 9 exhibitions, they are a short duration. They're a short duration.
Yeah, it's about 2 months and a half, 3 months for the long ones, and 5 weeks for the short ones. Welcome.
Thank you, Olivier. We could take up more also in terms of, since Pedro has also brought up the performance format of the 48 hours, I think it would be great to actually discuss some of your experiences of working with artists in more detail, perhaps tomorrow evening. But for now, we'd really like to close. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you.